injury, weakness, imbalance, immobility, inflexibility, opportunity. I want to talk a little bit about my perspective regarding an important aspect of martial arts training and experience and lifestyle, and that is approaching martial arts as a form of physiotherapy and preventative medicine. To me, the big part of why I'm training in martial arts is to improve my ability to express myself as a human being in this world. And there's many facets of that project, including my careful study and grooming my familiarity with nature, including my pursuit of a natural locavore diet off of the abundance that just occurs by nature. The martial arts, and I would include in that basically the survey of the entirety of human movement, is an important aspect. I mean, that's, aside from the nutrition, that's the rest of the body expression of the bodily expression of being human. And it's a relational expression. It's an expression of movement within the more or less static physical environment. You know, how can a human being move among these rocks, along this shoreline? I mean, obviously we can walk along these rocks. Some people would do it rather clumsily, others with some skill. Could I leap several boulders over and land in a balanced and skilled way? Could I move along these rocks quickly in a balanced and skilled way? You know, if I am able to express myself fully as a human, I should be able to. So this is one aspect of the relationality of movement, is moving in that more or less static environment. The other aspect being movement in relation to other living beings, and certainly including human beings in that. And so in that respect, all kinds of social, physical interaction I would include in my umbrella of the martial arts. And certainly in that relationality, in that relational context, fighting is one of the human to human physical relational events. So we have to be trained for that, and it's one of the ways that pretty much all animals are trained to express themselves. They can engage in combat with each other and with other species, and use various strategies to survive those encounters. But looking at martial arts, I certainly don't see it all as um, its purpose, all as training for combat. I see that as kind of even the lesser purpose of martial arts. Um, Absolutely, the techniques that we train in martial arts are practical and applicable to combat situations, to violent encounters. However, it's more than just fighting. When you add on that, when you tack on that suffix art, there's more to it. And although historians might not agree, I think it's important to keep in mind that martial arts typically traces its origin to the introduction of practices at Shaolin Temple by Zen founder Bodhidharma. And his purpose in introducing the practices, the exercises, the routines was to strengthen the bodies of the monks so that they would be more capable of carrying out their spiritual training. He saw their bodies as really languished and sickly and in need of strengthening. And he knew that in order to really carry out their spiritual training, it would benefit them to be strong of body. And so he introduces basically some Qigong practices that we know for sure, and then some would say some of the basic animal forms of martial arts. Historians might argue with the whole thing and call it a myth and fable and this kind of stuff, but even if it is, I think that's an important story to keep, because it to me, that is where the artistic aspect really starts to develop, and from there it's developed in all kinds of ways. But when we use that term art, it suggests that we are creatively expressing something, and it might not be what it first appears on the surface. It might be highly symbolic. And that's the way I look at martial arts training for the most part, is that yes, on the surface it's combat training, but there's a lot beyond that surface. And one huge aspect of what's beyond that surface is physical therapy, which is what Bodhidharma was giving to the monks. Physical therapy and preventative medicine. So as we go about, like me for instance, with my whole purpose for training in martial arts, to be able to improve my expression as a human being in this world, as a real human being, I have to examine my body for all of the ways that I am held back from being able to fully express myself. And those are the things the areas that I look to train my way out of. So, in what aspects could my strength be improved? In what aspects could my flexibility be improved? In what ways could my speed be improved? Do I have some imbalances? What about my posture? What about my core balance? What about my breathing? Do I have any injuries? What are my weaknesses of body? What are the things that I should be able to do as a human being that I can't do? You know, why am I not confident to leap over 3 or 4 of these large boulders at the water's edge and successfully land a jump in a graceful manner without hurting myself? You know, I should be able to do these things as a human being. I should be able to climb right up a tree with no problem. You know, I should be able to perform a butterfly kick. You know, these are anything that our human body is capable of doing. So I should be able to do a lot of that stuff. I mean, in a balanced way. If you really want to be the fastest runner, you just have to absolutely train in running. But it doesn't mean that martial artists can't run fast. Martial artists should be able to run fast. Not be the fastest, but run fast. So all of these things, all of these areas that I see as you know, areas of improvement that I need, that's what I focus the physical therapy on. And so certainly the techniques, the martial techniques, the combat techniques even, are an important aspect of this, because they teach correct posture, they teach correct breathing, they teach correct joint movement, they strengthen muscle sets that you're not going to strengthen just lifting weights or doing any other kind of exercise for that matter. There's nothing that's going to train your leg muscles the way a horse stance does, except the horse stance. You know, things like this. So the combat techniques, they're not just combat. They are potentially physiotherapy tools. When you look at somebody who's suffered some kind of an injury and they are in a physical therapy treatment facility, what are they doing? A lot of times they're just moving the joints, right? And martial arts shows us the correct way to move the joints in all of the possibilities, in all of the ranges that we have as human beings. You can have a spinal cord injury and have paralysis in parts of your body, and I feel like somebody who really is going to use the martial arts can reconnect neural pathways that have been damaged in spinal cord injuries. I think there's all kinds of injuries and all kinds of chronic diseases of the body, and certainly most of the diseases of modernity that are associated with our sedentary lifestyle and our bad diet can be treated with martial arts. You know, martial arts can't do everything. Martial arts is not a replacement for surgery, but it is the most complete form of physical therapy that exists, in my view. It is also preventative medicine. We should be able to utilize our martial arts to prevent injuries, to prevent diseases, and you know, all kinds of debilitations that are associated with our culture, with aging, the martial art should be something that you can do your whole life. It shouldn't be something that 20 and 30-year-olds do. There are different capabilities you're going to have throughout your life, depending on your age and such. But even a very old man, an 80-year-old who has been a martial arts practitioner, he should be able to move around very well, certainly have a heck of a lot more mobility and health than an 80-year-old who does not practice martial arts. He should be very vital. So this is all a big aspect of the training. It's the core of the training in my book, is the health of the human body and grooming our abilities as human beings to express ourselves through that body in all of the ways that we can as humans. So when an injury occurs during training, and injuries will occur, we should always look at the injury and what happened and really examine it and learn from that to try to avoid a repeat of that injury, of that circumstance happening in the future. And it's not always possible. Stuff happens, but you can always examine it and look for ways to like, say for instance, there's somebody sparring and somebody gets popped in the nose really good, right? Now, I'm not saying that you should look at that and say, okay, sparring is dangerous and don't spar. What I'm saying is you should look at it and say, okay, on the one side, the guy that did the popping, maybe he didn't have as much control as he should have. So he should be practicing control. That's his therapy, to avoid, as a preventative medicine, to avoid those kind of inflicting those kind of injuries in the future. On the other hand, the guy that got popped maybe didn't keep his guard up, didn't guard himself appropriately. Maybe he's got to learn about distancing and guarding and things like this. So you look at what actually happened and try to then develop a therapy for it so that it prevents it from happening again in the future. Stuff is going to happen sometimes that is really difficult to predict and avoid. I mean, somebody could bend down and pick up, a focus mitt, something very light off the ground, and just because they've maybe pushed their body too hard that day or did something that made them vulnerable, when they bend down to pick up that, their back could go out, right? And that's really hard to predict, and you're not going to stop picking up focus mitts off the ground or bending over to pick things up just because somebody's back goes out. But what you can do is then you know that that person has a weakness, and so you need to use your martial arts to train against that weakness. So this is the way that the injury should be dealt with in a kun, in a school. If somebody gets injured, they shouldn't stay away from the training, because that training is, like I said, the best form of physiotherapy to fix the problems that led to the injury. It's also a tremendous learning opportunity when somebody in the kun is injured. Not that you want to wish for injuries, absolutely the opposite. You want to, at most costs, really try to avoid people getting injured, because when people get injured, then it does affect their training. But they should not step out completely from training, because to do so, really, it steals a learning opportunity from their fellow Todai. Because their fellow Todai, at that point, can really learn, one, to avoid the kind of injury that they got, and then um, train to strengthen the weaknesses that brought it about to begin with, right? And you can learn all these different forms of preventative medicine and therapy when you're working with somebody that has an injury. So I think it's important, critically important, that when somebody's injured, that they continue to train, work around that injury, and in fact, to the extent that's possible, treat that injury through the martial arts. So rather than looking at an injury as something that, something that's really terrible, once it's already happened, it's happened. So use it to your advantage, because it's basically, it's a signal. It's the strongest signal as you can get that you've got a weakness that you need to train, right? And so stepping out of training is the exact opposite of what your body's telling you. Your body's not telling you stop training. Your body's telling you you have a weakness. Here's where it is. This is what you should focus on. And you have to be careful because it's weak. You have to really, be an artist of the healing of the body. And to me, that's what martial arts is largely about, right? You don't have to have an injury. It's just something that can improve. So your opponent is not necessarily a combatant, a physical human combatant in the martial arts. To me, it can be, the whole thing can be a giant work of art, highly symbolic, where the opponent that you're fighting is injury, weakness, imbalance, inability to move fast. All of these different shortcomings, and you can always be improving. And so that is your enemy. That's your enemy to fight. It's not another human being. Your enemy to fight are the things that are standing in your way of being able to fully express yourself, to the full capacities of your human body. So that's who I'm training to fight, and it's a lifelong practice. And in that sense, you can fight if you want. You can fight every day. In fact, I like to fight every day. But I'm not fighting another person. I'm not hurting anybody. I'm fighting the things that stand in my way of being a full, complete human being. So that's my thoughts. And I highly recommend considering martial arts as physical therapy and as preventative medicine.